Alright, welcome back to another post-commentary game. I'm going first here. What do we got going on? Doesn't look too incredible as far as starting hands go. A black woodpecker can be an explosive start, but you're very reliant on what you roll in the bird feeder. Omnivore Expert is the better bonus card over Backyard Burner, kind of a no-brainer pick there, even though there's no real obvious choice other than the Cuckoo, but that's also expensive to go with that bonus card. And we're going first here, and thankfully that's the case because there's an Eastern Imperial Eagle in the tray. So that's definitely going to be my first grab. Also looking at that white-throated swift on the left there, hiding behind my food display. Thinking about this, it's really not a good position because you really need a source of card drawing to start your game off. If you don't have that, you're really relying on the luck of the draw off the top of the deck. So really the only recourse we're left with here is to throw down that woodpecker and hope for some explosive food generation. That goes well with the swift, which costs worms, but we don't have any card draw to feed the swift. We don't have any card draw to feed the Eastern Imperial Eagle. So our back is up against the wall already, but at least we got some good cards to rely on, and we may need to rely on average cards that flip up in the tray to dig ourselves out of this card drawing deficit. The round goals are very egg intensive, although looking at the fourth round goal, it's birds with no eggs. So we got eggs in cavity nest for round 1. Black woodpecker will qualify for that, as well as the white-throated swift. There we see brant flip up in the tray, and that's actually looking like a compelling card drawing option for me here. Even if I get 3 bad birds, I can feed them to the Eastern Imperial Eagle. And I'm thinking about that here, kind of the choice between the brant and the white-throated swift. I can gain the brant, and if my opponent continues to leave the swift, I can pick up the swift with the brant. Bluebird is a very good combo with Eastern Imperial Eagle. I love pulling off those Bluebird big eagle plays, but I might not have the food to pull this off. So this kind of makes for a compelling brant play here. So in all my ramblings, when I was playing this game here, I noticed that my opponent took food right away, and they took a seed. And that's a classic sign of a wood duck start. And there we can see my opponent did play the wood duck, so it's feeling a little more demoralizing as I play these first few turns of round 1 because I don't really have a strong wetland card draw option, and my opponent is going to be leading with a wood duck. But we're not dead in the water yet. The brant has drawn us some cards. And there are no worms in the bird feeder though, so that makes it incredibly difficult to get this black woodpecker down. And I'm looking at that Eastern Phoebe, and I could throw that down in my grasslands. It is a star nest, qualifies for the round goal, and I can pick up the worms I need to play the black woodpecker. So there's kind of a lot going on these opening turns of the game, trying to for myself secure the cards I need to establish a strong game, and then my opponent leading with that wood duck really forces me into a kind of a desperation mode here. There we see Mute Swan flip up in the tray, and that's just not going to be possible for me. Too expensive. We don't really have the wetland support to go along with it. It's really all about, at this point, getting the Phoebe down, laying eggs on cavity nests, generating the worms. Going to need those worms for the black woodpecker, gain a bunch more food, and hopefully get this Eastern Imperial Eagle down. And I'm thinking about my food here for the Phoebe. I need to spend the worm because the Phoebe can recoup worms. I'm going to have to hand out that food to my opponent, but they're going to be doing well for food, generating a wood duck forest engine. And I'm in a position where I need to do this, so I just have to hand out those worms, bite the bullet, get my black woodpecker down, gain a bunch more food, hopefully. We're going to have to power through that stingy bird feeder. And there my opponent did gain food and flip it, but we have another roll that is mainly fish and rats. And the bird feeder is not conducive for re-rolling, so that's going to hurt my woodpecker here. So we're coming into the closing turns of round 1, and we've kind of established ourselves a good position here. It's not great, but it's not terrible either. We have the ability to leverage a potential grassland engine with the Phoebe and the Swift on deck, but we still need cards en masse. We need cards to feed to the Eagle and to the Swift. So I'm kind of looking at the wetland options in the tray here. They're not great. Squawko Heron could be a potential card draw option. I don't like relying on that bird. Doesn't really have that great of a power, but desperate times call for desperate measures. So here I have 2 cavity nests on the board. There we see plenty of worms in the bird feeder here. My opponent also has 2 cavity nests. So they haven't had a terribly explosive start, but they got plenty of food, and they've got cards in hand with the wood duck. So I can lay eggs here and win this round goal. Or not win it, but tie it rather. And there my Omnivore Expert flashes a little bit there, and that reminds me that the Brant is also very good for that, picking up an extra 2 points. So we've managed to tie the round goal here and have a pretty solid position, but like I said, we really need to still find a card drawing solution, and despite not having one, we've done pretty well in getting a solid round 1 on the board. And we haven't managed to win this round goal. I think I misspoke earlier. I thought it was the birds with cavity nests with eggs goal, but it's actually eggs in cavity nests. So the sizable nest of the Eastern Phoebe helped us win that round goal. Now we have to focus on birds in 1 row, and that should be doable. The round 2 tray reveals our card drawing solution in the red-breasted merganser. Looking at the Bell's Vireo here. It's a good bonus card bird. There we see Mourning Dove flip up in the tray, and that's exactly what a wood duck wants. There we see a ruff for my opponent. That's pretty demoralizing as well. A wood duck backed up by a ruff. Kind of feels like in this moment I'm kind of thinking like this is a loss, but we have hope in front of us. Continue to lay some eggs here. Probably going to hand out another worm, because we need to get that black woodpecker down. And then the Bell's Vireo works very well with the woodpecker, because if you gain a bunch of worms, you have all the food you need to play that Vireo. So my opponent has a ton of food here, and they're not really showing any major forest development. So I kind of feel like they're stalling a little bit. There we see that that Mourning Dove. They drew that from the tray and played it. So here comes the black woodpecker. And looking at my opponent's board, we have 4 turns left in round 2. I'm kind of feeling like I'm going to be able to claw back from this. It definitely doesn't feel great to see the wood duck start backed by ruff, because that's just so many cards that my opponent is going to get to cycle through and see. They only had 1 cycle on the ruff at the end of last round, so that's not terrible. But it kind of feels like I'm in a position to where I'm clawing back, despite my opponent's superior card drawing position and lacking one in any capacity myself. I've gotten a very high card quality. So here we see some worms pay off from the woodpecker right after it's played. My opponent gains food here, and honestly, I'm in such a good position, I don't even really need to play the merganser right now. Belzevirio goes down. Birdbander isn't amazing for us here. We got a lot of single habitat birds, and with Eastern Imperial in hand, Rodentologist kind of a no-brainer. Now our forest is a little more well-developed with that Belzevirio sitting there. I am going to want to get this merganser down though eventually. And there we see Caroline Wren from my opponent. Kind of a odd play to throw that white power down in a wood duck engine. You kind of want as many of those good point scoring brown powers as you can get. Gain more food here. We have the food we need for the merganser. As I was saying, we need to get that merganser down and just draw cards to feed our swift and our eagle. And we're starting to get a little food rich ourselves here, and the potential for the bluebird eagle is on the table. That's not going to be in time for the round 2 goal, but it's definitely a long-term play I'm looking at here. My opponent continues to gain food, so they're very food rich, but they're not playing any birds. Tons of food here. They really need to see one of those food tucking birds like the common starling or the Eurasian collared dove, but they're just not seeing it. And this is kind of the traditional weakness of wood duck, in my opinion. Yes, it's great that you're drawing those cards from the forest, but you're only netting 1 card per activation. And if you just happen to see 2 bad cards, that is almost as bad as not having any cards at all. But the silver lining for my opponent is having that rough there to recycle bad cards into better cards. And here I'm thinking about the bluebird play here. I'm thinking about overpaying for it. But yeah, I should be getting that merganser down to save the food. Or save the food for the bluebird is what I'm thinking here in the moment. I want to try to get the cherry and not have to overpay for it. And then I can continue to draw cards here in order to feed my eagle. Redback Shrike is a potential option here, especially with Rodentologist and Omnivore Expert. But I don't know that I actually considered that in the moment. I was very focused on my bluebird eagle. Thinking about that now, might have been a good option, but continuing to establish myself for my card drawing, my food gaining, to work with the cards that I already have in hand, seems like a good use of tempo. And we draw some more cards here. Another Pab bird, those are always good to have. Kind of looking at this belted kingfisher here. It is an omnivore bird. It is a star nest. Well, Tony's can go. Not going to be one of those games. Pretty late in the game for that. But yeah, the belted kingfisher can be fairly useful here. It's a 6-point play under Omnivore Expert, and it gives me another ground nest toward the round goal. We have 4 on the board right now. That could be the 5th. And there we see Sandhill Crane for my opponent. So they're pivoting into the grasslands, which is fairly typical for wood duck engines to do. And he's going to be able to make use of a lot of extra wheat here. And there the black woodpecker pays off with a ton of worms. Sandhill Crane is also a ground nest toward the wrong goal, so that's useful for them. And there we see they follow it up with a common grackle, so they're hard pivoting to grasslands, and it looks like they have some pretty good cards to make it happen. So that's starting to get a little bit scary now. I'm starting to feel like things are slipping back in my opponent's favor. Throw down that kingfisher. My opponent lays eggs, gets a good grassland activation. We're going to spend the egg on extra cards here for our hungry eagle. lot of good tucking fodder here. Black-throated diver, kind of late for that. And we're going to pick up the blue-winged warbler. That'll pair very well with the woodpecker that we have, the PAB bird. And having that double worm cost pairs very well with the black woodpecker. We have a very large worm surplus at the moment. There's a good look at my opponent's board. Taking a bit of time to think about their next action, probably focusing on the wrong goal. So they play a wetland bird, and we pick up a free fish here. That's always useful. They play blackneck still. So we're going to use that fish and our rat to overpay for the bluebird. And here comes the eagle. Thinking pretty hard about this, considering the hawk for rodentologists here. Now we have a fairly strong grassland activation. We're going to be able to pull off 5 eggs. With our last activation of the round, we'll be able to cover all of our ground nests. And that black-necked stilt helps my opponent to keep their hand filled for the rough. Helps them to see more cards. It's also a ground nest for the round goal, of which they only have 3. There they gain some more food. And here we secure the round goal. We're going to get an extra egg off the swift. And I should skip the worm here, yep. We're doing alright on worms. So my opponent only has 2 birds in their grasslands, but it's a fairly strong activation. 3 eggs, a tuck and an egg, and 2 extra tucks. That's a 7-point activation with just having 2 birds in their grasslands, and that's pretty terrifying. So another wetland bird for my opponent. Another free fish. And they threw down a wood stork. Don't want to see that toward the end of the game. Those good bonus card bombs are always a great play for anybody. So we win that round goal very easily. And we enter into round 4 here. Birds with no eggs. I always hate to see that in round 4. That's going to work against my opponent because they're incentivized to run their grasslands. It's also going to work against me, but at least it's working against both of us. There's a big Baltimore Oriole for my opponent. I'm going to draw some more cards here to feed my swift in the closing turns of the game. I'm going to spend the egg on a card, because every card I have can be converted into 2 points on the swift. There's a late game raven. And we have omnivore and rodentologist, so this raven could actually be a pretty good bomb. It would also burn off 2 eggs, which would help us toward the round goal. My opponent gains more food and hands out a free cherry. We'll put that to use. So I spend a lot of time thinking about this turn now. I have a lot of options. The raven is definitely going to go down. Goldfinch, probably not going to do anything for us here. We have the woodpecker that can go into the goshawk or into the warbler. Goshawk picks up an extra 2 points from rodentologist. But ultimately the goshawk would consume the cards that would be going toward the swift. Decide to lay some eggs here, keeping all the eggs centralized on my larger nest birds, with the round goal in consideration here. And I do hand out the worm. Gonna need a lot of food here, probably going to overpay with worms on the raven, because we're missing that rat. That's a pretty food intensive plays coming up here. A woodpecker into another forest bird, and the raven. So my opponent just wants to drop a bunch of bombs here and burn off their eggs. They got plenty of food to do it. There's a house finch in the grasslands. Kind of an interesting play there to play a tuck draw bird this late in the game. It's probably a bonus card play. Here comes the woodpecker warbler. My opponent probably has viticulturalists to see that late game house finch like that. My opponent lays eggs. Here comes the raven bomb. Last activation of the game here. Thinking about this pretty hard. And we have just the food we need in order to play this thing. So the Phoebe coming through there. And we have only one bird with eggs on it here. So we're in a pretty good position for this wrong goal. And my opponent ends the game with some eggs. Looks like I have another activation left here. I must have been tricked myself. I must have been looking at the activations after I had the raven down or something like that. Thought I saw 0 there. So we got one more activation left. And we're just probably going to lay eggs here because we have the large nest to still win the round goal and score points with the grassland activation. Don't need the food from the raven. I think I'm just considering having a look to see if there's an egg I can burn off to help secure the round goal. Not really an option here. And we're going to tuck goldfinch. Looking at this round goal here. So the goshawk would have consumed 2 of the cards that we were able to tuck for points here, so that's why I went with the woodpecker warbler play there instead of the goshawk in the previous turns. Alright, so that's the end of the game now. Gonna win this wrong goal fairly securely. And here's the end. So we won it by 1 bird, so it wasn't that secure. Alright, if you liked that action, do me a favor and hit the like button. I'd really appreciate it. Let's see if we were able to beat the wood duck. They did really well on bonus cards. That's not good. We're staying ahead though. But they evened it up on caches. And the tuck cards managed to win it for my opponent here. So despite our very bad start for card drawing, we managed to claw back and keep ourselves in the game. A very respectable score of 95. I'm very satisfied with that, especially with the start we had. And the wood duck manages to pull it out. My opponent said afterward he definitely felt like the game could have gone either way, and I agree. We had a very large hole to climb out of in the face of that starting wood duck, and we did a very good job utilizing the cards that were available to us in order to attempt that. Take a look at my opponent's board. They had the viticulturalist max out and bird counter 8 points, so pretty incredible for them. Wood duck strikes again, but we put up a good fight. Thanks for watching, everybody.